Very appreciative of everyone popping in and seeing, but just a quick video. And I just wanted to talk about the news that is hitting the Catholic world and the traditional Catholic world. And that is that Bishop de Mallerais, he was a Society Pope Pius X bishop, has died today. So for those who might have not been following along, he took a fall, a pretty bad one, I believe in Yaokam, Switzerland, at the Society House there, a little bit ago, and had been in very critical condition. But the Society Pope Pius X itself kind of put out a notice saying that he was at death's door and was asking for prayers. And sure enough, today the bishop has passed away. And so, Amanda, I love what you say right off the bat, Requiem Aeternam. Yes, indeed. So eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord. And I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about my initial thoughts and reactions and maybe what this means for the Society Pope Pius X and the traditional movement going forward. But of course, first and foremost, His Excellency Bishop de Mallerais needs our prayers, not our condemnation. And even before our praise for some of us in the audience, he needs our prayers. And so I want to commend him to the care of Our Lady. And regardless of your own feelings on the Society Pope Pius X or on Bishop de Mallerais, I do think it's very important that we just take a step back as Catholics and realize that when someone has died, that we have an obligation to pray for his soul. So with All Souls Day coming up, if that is another name you'll include in your prayers, then let that be, so be it. I never had an interaction with Bishop de Mallerais, but I do know that some of you follow my friend Nick Cavazos, the traditional Thomist. His confirmation was done under Bishop de Mallerais. He had a conditional confirmation, and he goes into more detail on his channel about that. And so if you want to maybe learn about that perspective and his interaction with His Excellency, that would be a very good place. But for myself, when I thought about this, he was 79 years old, so not too old comparatively. I mean, he is past the retirement age usually of bishops, but because the society believes and still holds that the church is in crisis mode, I don't know what exactly determines how the succession of bishops will go on with the society. And that's really what I also wanted to talk about. And I can tell because I've been kind of seeing a lot of stories across the traditional world that de Mallerais was loved, and he was ordained or consecrated as bishop very, very young. And of course, we know the stories of the excommunications and how they were lifted, of course. So my prayer is that regardless of my opinion or your opinion, maybe on the canonical status of the Society of Pope Pius X, that he died as a Catholic, and that he died in friendship with God and loving the Lord, and that he may be welcomed to the light of his face, because that's what we should hope for everybody. The Society of St. Pius X is now down to 2 bishops. De Mallerais has died. Williamson, of course, was expelled or left the society, depending on who you talk to. He has founded the Society of Pope Pius X Resistance. So that leaves Fillet and Galaretta. And I don't know much about Galaretta. I know just a touch about Fillet, but Fillet tends to be probably a little bit more popular with the English-speaking world. And I thought it's interesting that there are 2 bishops still, but there aren't any more. That if you are a priest and certainly a bishop of the Society of St. Pius X, why would you not attempt, well, you might say, well, Williamson, of course, has done at least 4 consecrations, and apparently, including Vigano now. I'm not trying to get into the weeds of that, but the other bishops haven't. So what does the Society of Pope Pius X think of in regard to the church in crisis, and has that differed compared to when Marcel Lefebvre consecrated the 4 bishops? Because it seems like right now that the apostolic succession is shrinking as far as the Society of Pope Pius X is concerned. Now, maybe there is some of you who might attend Mass with a society, or perhaps you know of the bishops, and maybe you could enlighten me a little bit more. I have a theory, but I'm not trying to cause any rumors. I just think that hopefully when the full unity of Rome and the society, because they're canonically irregular, I know, yada, yada, yada. But when that fullness happens, I wonder if it would make sense for the society to go down to 1 bishop, just like how the fraternity was promised, right? And that they would be able to conduct themselves as a proper priestly society inside the church, with one bishop, as you might see, for instance, in the Anglican Ordinariate, where they have one bishop. That's my speculation. That's not fact or anything. But I was very touched because since I know somebody who Bishop de Mallerais had a very, very particular effect on, I thought, we have all these wars inside the traditional movement concerning the Society of Pope Pius X. There are people who adore the society, who are very grateful for the society. There are, of course, people who are very anti the society. If you want to see my opinion actually is the opinion of the church. So Rudy and I did a video months ago on what does the church teach about the Society of Pope Pius X? Are they in schism? And on top of that, Father Gerald Murray on Ask a Priest Live. He's a very, very sharp, great canon lawyer. And he also gave a video about, is the Society of Pope Pius X in schism, and what does the church actually teach? So I echo, if you want to know my opinion in a nutshell, I echo the church's opinion. I also echo the opinion of His Excellency Bishop Schneider, who on Taylor Marshall's podcast a few years ago said that there's a really strange time when you can apparently be suspended for some sacraments, but not all sacraments. That's not something that happens in the church's history. This is the kind of time we're in. So going back to the question of the society, the reason Lefebvre, of course, made his consecrations after much back and forth with Rome, and there's plenty of history, and I don't have the time, nor do I want to get into everything, but I just want to point out that Lefebvre really did believe that the church was in crisis, that there was a real danger of the authenticity, the beauty, and the orthodoxy of the Catholic faith being, I don't think he would have said lost, because the gates of hell we know cannot prevail, but certainly obscured for a long time. And that's not the first time in history that's happened for an entire region or even a people's. We know that St. Jerome says that the church woke up to find itself Arian, and that must have been a terrifying time to be a Catholic. Or maybe you're part of very Catholic England at the time of the English Reformation, and suddenly your church has changed, and the way of life that you had known all your life, such as Sir Thomas More, doesn't exist anymore. Do I believe that the Society of Pope Pius X is right? Do I believe that the church is in crisis? Do I believe that the consecrations of the 4 bishops under Marcel Lefebvre, do I believe that those are right? I probably generally do, but I always say this. I think the better analogy, in Catholics, we need to be more charitable with each other on this, is it's a great divorce. I've only assisted at Mass with the society one time in my life. There's a very beautiful, very big society chapel up the road from me here in Denver. But for the vast majority of my time as a traditionalist, I attend Mass with the Fraternity of St. Peter. And the reason why might be because there's no need for worry about canonical regularity if you have family members or yourself who's very sensitive to that, but also because it's through the fraternity that I really got deeper into my faith and I discovered the traditional Latin Mass. And I have a very beautiful filial piety to the fraternity because of that. Not to the discarding of other religious orders. When I move to St. Louis, I'll be attending Mass with the Institute of Christ the King, and I've gotten to know so many great Institute of Christ the King priests, but that's where my heart is. Now, I myself have come through a journey. I started by being very worried about the status of society, and I've listened to the arguments made by men certainly far smarter than me about supply jurisdiction, right, and canonical regularity and irregularity. And at the end of the day, I just think God must write straight with crooked lines. And it's hard for us, especially kind of a new generation of traditionalists, where Latin Mass has just been easier to find post 2008, let's say. Even in the world of Triciones, it's just easier to find for a lot of us. I know not all of us, and I'm sorry if your Latin Mass has been closed. But I think that we sometimes forget what the world exactly was like for so many Catholics, friends. So many Catholics who woke up in the 60s and in the 70s and into the 80s. And the churches which sometimes their ancestors built were destroyed or changed over. The way the theology was expressed to them was destroyed or changed over. How the church looked and felt and believed in herself was destroyed and changed over. I do use the analogy of a great divorce because I don't blame Bishop Marcel Lefebvre, and I don't blame the 4 bishops, and I don't blame the priests of the Society of Pope Pius X wanting to carry on the tradition and patrimony of the Catholic faith and being impeded. You cannot read a book like They Have Uncrowned Him, or one of my favorite, which is Open Letter to Confused Catholics, Or Priests, Where is Thy Mass? You cannot read those and realize so many people, countless amount of people, had their faiths snuffed out because of wicked men who wanted to change everything and didn't care how you felt, didn't care what the truth of the gospel message was supposed to be, who turned going to Latin Mass into a political, into a divisive sort of statement, where sometimes now we look at even other countries where that is still the case. So I don't blame them. I don't blame them for waking up, wanting to keep the faith and realizing that it hasn't. The society has made a very, very high bar claim, which is that it's not that the Novus Ordo is invalid, but it's deficient is the word they use. And that attendance over time with the Novus Ordo does water down your belief and acceptance of the fullness of the Catholic faith. I can't hate what I've loved. I actually was just back at my Novus Ordo parish growing up, and the priest there is actually making it way more traditional, trying to turn things around, and I'm very grateful to him for doing that. So I think I have a very nuanced view exactly of what that deficiency might mean, because for my life, I can't hate what taught me Christ, but I'm also very much aware that so many of the kids and friends who are with me in confirmation class aren't Catholic anymore. So maybe there's something to it. On the other end of the spectrum, friends, and this is why we have to be charitable as Catholics to each other, I do not blame those priests of the society of the priestly fraternity of St. Peter who went to John Paul II begging for their mass, but hoping not to be cast out to the darkness. Excommunication in the 80s looks a little bit different than it does now. Because now there's all these armchair Catholics everywhere, and I'm one of them, right? I have a podcast, and so you can go on and find your community and really break things down. And talking to a canon lawyer, I can just call one up and call one instantly and really figure this out. Back then, this is all snail mail, and all the correspondence between Lefebvre and Ratzinger, it's all through letters and decrees and this and that. I don't blame those priests. I don't blame them for being terrified of what's happening and saying we have to cling to the Pope, even if that means taking a beating. And you might hear occasionally a homily on obedience or something. And I think, especially as Catholics in this era, it can feel a little disingenuous. I'm not going to lie. Like, I don't think the problem here is that we just need to be obedient to good authority. The problem might be with the question of that authority. But we shouldn't criticize or chastise or tear down those Catholics either who make up the fraternity of St. Peter. This is what it means when something like this happens, the death of a bishop. It's a time for us as Catholics to sit around and really pray for the intercession of the saints to guide souls to heaven. The whole reason I talk about the faith on this podcast, the whole reason you and I go to Mass, the whole reason we fight about sedevacantism and canonical regularity and the sacraments and the Eucharist and tradition and reverence, the only reason we do those at the end of the day, brothers and sisters, is because these things are supposed to be aids to our ordinary means of salvation, which is the sacraments. That grace through Jesus Christ is a gift freely given, and that Christ has given the world his bride, the church, as a teacher of the world. And that is her mission, the salvation of souls. If we forget that in the noise because it sounds fun to dunk on people who love the Novus Ordo, or people who love the Latin Mass, or people who love the Latin Mass but only with the society, or people who love the Latin Mass but only with the fraternity, or any other group we can possibly imagine, we have lost the plot. That's what I mean when I say earlier that I do believe that God writes straight with crooked lines. He has to write straight with crooked lines. So I don't know. I am very interested. Cole, I love what your comment is. Will they consecrate more without papal mandate or what? I don't know what the Society of Pope Pius X will do. What I think we should all pray for, brothers and sisters, is that even a perceived crisis or the actual crisis may resolve itself as smooth as possible, that doesn't result in the loss of souls. I have a friend, and he's had an up and down story of the sacraments, baptism, confirmation, conditional confirmations, all that kind of stuff, right? Just a very rocky road. And in his family story, what happened is that the changes happened in the 60s into the 70s, and his grandma, one of the pillars of the faith, stopped going to Mass. Not because she hated Jesus, not because she hated not because she hated the Catholic Church, but because what she had sworn to love seemed to stop loving her. That is the actual definition of scandal. Scandal was a word reserved for clergy. A scandal inside the church. People were snuffed out by the millions. We've seen that graph. Vocations, consecrated and religious life, marriages, commitments to the faith. One of our guests, Charles Colomb, talking about sacramentals being ripped up from the pulpit. That happened at Sacred Heart in California, the epicenter of nuns ditching their habits, who they called a medieval costume. It's easy to forget that that is the kind of world that Lefebvre is writing about in Open Letter to Confuse Catholics. The great turmoil about releasing a catechism for Catholics in France and the Netherlands, and for it being wrong. Again, great book. You should read it. Even if you're not a society guy, it's totally fine. You should read it because it feels like it could have come out yesterday. And look at our own time. Who is right? Benedict with, not quote primum, that's Pope Pius the Fifth. Oh my gosh. The encyclical that predates Traditionis Custodes completely went away with. Summorum Pontificum. Thank you, Pope Benedict. We live in a world where either Benedict is right in Summorum Pontificum, where the Latin Mass is something that was never abhorred, and furthermore, priests can, especially because of the request of their faithful, say the Latin Mass. It is their right, their patrimony to do so. And on top of that, they don't need permission from the bishop. Or we live in a world, actually, where that regulation needs to happen, not just from your bishop, but from Rome itself. And priests are not allowed to. And you're not allowed to build new Latin Masses. And there's only one unique expression of the Roman rite. Those two ideas we went through in a decade, friends. They can't exist together. That's what we call a hermeneutic of rupture. So for anyone out there who says, well, the church isn't clearly in crisis, the SSPX are off their bloody rockers, I don't think so. Even though, again, I attend Mass with the fraternity, and I'm quite happy with that. If it's fraternity priests who marry me and bury me, I'll be overjoyed. So I see your comment here, Luke. I heard rumors that there were some priests that they were praying for consecration, but nothing confirmed yet. Yeah, and I'm not trying to spread any rumors on this channel, but I don't know what exactly the solution is. What I really do pray is I hope it'll happen in the next pontificate, because let's be honest, even in this one, there are some things that Pope Francis does that actually very much surprises me. And one of the things was extending the year of mercy with the society on the subject of confession, then making that indefinite, and then including also on top marriages, which also, by the way, means the Mass for marriages, which also means the Eucharist, which is why Bishop Schneider says, how can you have partial suspensions on the sacraments here, but then not here? Like, you can go to confession with a society priest, and that's all good. You can even give money. Rome says you can give money at a society Mass because, of course, Rome has said this is a canonical irregular issue. It's very difficult. However, it's an internal matter. Jordan, they don't have supply jurisdiction. Oh my gosh. Do you in the pew, do we honestly, like, does that really govern us? When you're trying to save your children, when you go, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to teach my faith in a world of this stupid thing to my kids. I don't know if that's a conversation for the laity, friends. Just pulling that out there. Anyway, getting off kilter. Yeah, I think we should pray. We should offer a rosary and the repose of the soul of Bishop de Mallerais. And also a prayer that whatever needs to happen between Rome and the society resolves itself. Tomorrow, I hope that the Pope could just call in the last two bishops and go, hey, listen, we'll get this all sorted out. We'll get what you think about in concerning the Second Vatican Council. We'll get what you think about the Novus Order. We'll get this all sorted out. Canonical regularity, so everyone at least on YouTube can shut up, including me, so I can just shut up about it. I don't have to look over my shoulder every time I want a traditional sacrament in my life. Oh, because you hate the Pope and the Novus Ordo. No. I just don't want there to be confusion. I would just like the Catholic faith. How difficult is that to ask? God literally gave us the church. Come on now. We should pray for that. We should pray for a very, very peaceful and agreeable solution that, again, is not going to result in the loss of more souls. The amount of damage that has been done, friends, from all of these changes, the amount of damage that has been done from even holding fast to tradition, the confusion. I see your comment, Cynthia. The confusion is mind-boggling, and it's terribly saddening. This confusion has driven apart families. You have to remember, Lefebvre didn't just come out of nowhere. The society put Pius X priests, especially back when they were in the 70s and really clinging on and Rome was totally cool with them, they didn't just come out of nowhere. These were men who were watching their faith and their family lives be destroyed. Lefebvre, in Open Letter to Confused Catholic, has a really interesting kind of explanation about these priests who dress in plain clothes and actually have regular day jobs and things. If you watch that documentary that Rudy and I, and Nick, I do believe, we riffed on a little bit, or at least Rudy and I, for our 1,000 subscriber special, The New American Catholic, then you will see that there were nuns towards the end who decided to live in houses, not in the convent, right? They lived in houses in downtown Omaha, Nebraska, take your pick of any place in America, and had these little co-ops, and they had little crosses here, but they just dressed like regular women from the 60s and the 70s. And we know what happened to those ladies. Those are called pantsuit nuns, friends. And in a decade, 2 decades, they will cease to exist. Entire orders are going to cease to exist. They already are. It's terribly sad. I'm not gloating over this. I'm not saying, ha, told you so. Lefebvre was right. Cope. I mean, I have that meme. I'm not gonna lie. I have that meme, but it's a bit tongue in cheek. It's not supposed to actually be, I'm gonna dab on people who didn't know any better. The solution is grace. The solution is forgiveness. The solution is prayer. Which is why I don't blame men who watched the world go to hell and a handbasket, who had their mass saved only because Agatha Christie put her name on it, a non-Catholic, by the way. I'm not going to blame them for saying, yeah, we're in crisis mode. It should make us very frustrated, Catholics, brothers and sisters, that we can only quote one St. Athanasius from the time of the Arian heresy. Of course, there were other great men and women who stood up for the fullness of the Catholic faith in that time. But out of that, St. Athanasius. At the time of Henry VIII, we have Bishop John Fisher. Bishop John Fisher was the only bishop of all the Anglican bishops who would rather die for the faith than lose his soul. So whenever we moan about bad bishops and good bishops, you have to remember this has been going on for a very long time. It should frustrate us that we only have the name of, at most, what, hundreds of English martyrs? There are more. God be praised. I hope there are more. There are more people willing to fight for the faith or hide for the faith or do whatever they needed to. But we're living in a world where we say it's emblematic. We have John Fisher and we have St. Thomas More. The cavalry's not coming, friends. How is the SSPX going to resolve itself? What goes forward? I don't know. I want to go back. It's not that the cavalry isn't coming. The cavalry is Christ. I mean, that's really the end of it. That's what I mean to say. So again, we revisit what Padre Pio says. Now, I do think, don't get it twisted. I do think that there is an importance of obedience to the Roman Pontiff. I do think that there's an importance of obedience to the magisterial teaching of the Catholic Church. I would not recommend that you go to Mass with schismatics just because they're offering Latin Mass. Any more than I say, as much as it sucks, I don't know if going to the Divine Liturgy of the Orthodox is going to be more edifying for your Catholic faith versus St. Silly's down the road, right? I can't, as a Catholic in good conscience, tell you to do so. I can't point to you and say, aha, go to a society Mass. Because I think that's something that might take just a little bit of research for your own kind of shelf. I can tell you for my conscience, for my soul, how I believe, how I hold my God of the universe, how I think God sometimes condescends to me, stupid Jordan. When I go to a Mass of the Society of Pope Pius X, I don't feel like I'm stepping outside the Catholic faith. They're not sedevacantists. Canonical irregularity does not scare me because I do believe that there is a huge crisis point in the church. We live in a world right now, friends, where at least a couple of entire churches, i.e. like the Germans, are essentially in soft schism. Bishop against bishop, cardinal against cardinal. Our Lady has warned us about this. Our Lady doesn't just say innocuous, flippant things for no reason. She means it. But the solution is not going to be for Catholics killing each other and tearing each other down. The solution has to be grace to even people that we disagree with inside the church. This fight of the society is an internal matter. Instead of dancing on the grave of a dead society bishop, we should pray for his soul. The fight in our own families, right? Oh, I hate my sister goes to such a hippy dippy Novus Ordo, that kind of stuff. Oh, and I talk about it too. Like that fight, however, needs to be governed by grace, charity, caritatis, love for our neighbor. I want that to be the final takeaway. We have to love our enemies. We have to pray for those who persecute us. We have to love our friends. We sometimes forget this, but there is way more that we agree upon than disagree. And yeah, it's fun. It's fun to have a fraternity flag back there somewhere. There's an institute flag over here, but it's huge, by the way. I can't do anything with it. It's ginormous. God bless the institute. I'll just fly it outside my house someday. If the society wants to send me something, I don't really have anything of the society. I personally went with the Baronius press instead of an Angelus press because I liked a Baronius a little bit better. But I have no qualms. I have no fight. I'm on bigger fish to fry, man. Guys, we have to start consecrating this world to Our Lady. We have to start getting ourselves out of states of sin. We have to start living like Catholics and communally living like Catholics. We have to love the Pope even when the Pope drives us crazy. We have to love bishops even when they do the wrong thing. Faith, hope, and love abide, but the greatest of these is love. So tonight, if you take away anything, take away that we need to pray for Bishop de Mallerais, for his soul, and all the souls of the faithful departed, that through the mercy of God, they may rest in peace. That is a hope that we are charged with as Catholics to do. And maybe we be a little bit nicer to each other. Maybe we stop clutching our pearls just this week a little bit. We can go back to the regular fun-spirited infighting next week. Maybe this week we get some time to reflect. And pray for those people who have been really affected by Bishop de Mallerais. I know of one very personally now. Because it's hard for me in my heart of hearts to think that a man who seemed to have dedicated his entire life and lost a lot of family and a lot of flack and a lot of prestige for doing it too, by the way, that he was at the end of the day an enemy of Christ. It's hard for me to believe. And I pray that God also sees that there might be bigger fish to fry. We must commit him and all of ourselves to God's justice, but also to God's mercy. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Just a short video. Wanted to talk about that. God bless you and may He keep you. Hey, I'll see you on the next one. Adios.